Hello, this is Daniel Calman, and for my senior exit project, we will be taking a closer look into forensic science. So what is forensic science? In simple words, forensic science is the analysis of objects found by the law enforcement, but I learned in interviews that it is also can be seen as like forensic science is any science that is used in the courtroom and to help convict someone. So each field is as specific and technical as the last. There's crazy new things that people find out all the time. There's tons of lab work in the subject. So there's a bunch of innovations in the 20th century that completely changed what we know about forensic science and what the limits are, and forensic science is still pushing the limits these days. So criminal psychology is what I really wanted to look into for part of this project because it's really important in forensics, but not many people know that. So before making assumptions about who has committed the crime, it is better to think why someone would do the specific crime. Detectives try and figure out who would have had a motive, but it's not the only way to look inside the mind of a criminal. There are a ton of bizarre ways. This video I didn't have time to put in, but if you look right in between those times, it's a really cool way to look inside the mind of a killer. Even journalists do it. But stuff like that can actually help in cases. So criminal psychology compared to forensic science. So although both subjects share a root in crime, they do have some key differences. Forensics is much more reliant on hard facts, whereas criminal psychology looks more into why they would have done this. Forensic scientists' jobs are to apply science and provide evidence, while criminologists' jobs are to look at the scenario for soft evidence and leads that might help prevent another crime. I learned a lot about the differences of the two subjects through my interview with Zachary Goss, a criminal justice student at Cal State. Okay, going back. Alright, start the interview.
Hello, this is Daniel Calman. I'm now calling Zachary Goss for my first interview. Criminology. Alright, sounds good to you. Alright, how do forensics and criminology relate?
Well, they're both tools that law enforcement use to build cases and understand crime, essentially. Forensics being more like a science and building hard facts of a case, while criminology is more like a sociology of crime, where you understand why criminals do such things and how they do them and where crime comes from.
Alrighty. What are the biggest differences between the two subjects?
The biggest difference is that forensic science is like a hard science, like math, like physics and things like that, and chemistry. There's a lot of chemistry in forensics, while criminology, like I said, it's more of a sociology of crime. So in like a criminology class, you'd be studying, what crime is and who does crime and why do crime, and that is more of a criminology approach to crime opposed to forensic hard science.
Alright. What types of technology are relied upon in the subject you study?
Well, in criminology, which is what I really want to study, is not a super tech-focused one. Mostly we do like case studies, and we build theories and things like that. But in criminal justice, you still have things like crime technology, which is all about, like tech crime. And forensic science has all sorts of cool gadgets, like they have like luminol for blood and fingerprint dust, all sorts of things like that.
That's cool. I didn't know some of that. What are the most fascinating things you have witnessed or heard about in your studies?
Fascinating stuff. When I was a freshman and we were taking a sociology class for our crime major, I remember there was we were talking about the murder of Kitty Genovese. I don't know if you've heard of that, but what happened was that Kitty got murdered in broad daylight around like 30-something people, and she was stabbed to death, and no one did anything. And while that was the story the New York Times ran with then, it turned out not to be totally true. I think someone did call the cops. But what's been used as now is a parable, kind of like a lesson story, or something called the bystander effect, which the more people are around and witness a crime, the less likely anyone is to do anything, because it diffuses the responsibility for reporting it. That's kind of an interesting thing that I heard about, and I think about a lot.
Oh yeah, that was super interesting. Next one was, what made you want to study criminology?
Okay, that's about all we're going to use from that one. Next slide, 20th century timeline of forensic innovation. So the 20th century is really where this subject kind of boosted off. It had a lot of innovation of obviously inventions of new things that could get evidence out of people, really is what was going on then in simple words. So did you know that forensic science was being used all the way back in the BCs when the Chinese used fingerprint technology? We've come a long way before DNA testing, and here are some notable ones. Okay, 20th century timeline of forensic innovation. So start things off, 1901, Sir Edward Richard Henry becomes the head of Scotland Yard and adopts the fingerprint identification. In 1902, Harry Jackson becomes the first person to get convicted with this fingerprint technology. 1910, Edward Locard opens the first forensics lab. This is in France. Then 1923, Fry versus United States kind of set the whole standard for how we use forensic evidence in court. It's really influential to the future of how that all worked. Then 1924, Hans Berger, he invents the EEG, which was the first objective test of the human brain. Okay. Then in 1925, Philip Gravel and Calvin Goddard, they made the comparison microscope. 1932, the FBI's forensic lab is established. 1954, Indiana policeman, develops the breathalyzer. 1974, detection of gunshot residue is finally created. And then 1977, the FBI institutes the AFIS, which is a whole database of fingerprints, which is actually used a lot. A lot of these creations are still really relevant to this day and essential in a forensics lab, even with DNA testing becoming relevant in the late 20th century. We're finding out there are still many new abstract ways that forensic scientists can get evidence. So this was one of my favorite instances of just like something out of the blue or irrelevant that you'd think that would actually end up help convicting a murder. So in about 1990, there was a report of a suicide in the Seattle estuary. It was just kind of all over the place with the report. There's no car, person was 50 miles away from their house, no pants, no shoes. Just really didn't seem like a instance where someone would be taking their own life. You know, there's like usually planned, someone might leave a note, they'll make it somewhat clear. So there's an attorney prosecutor, Mike Rickard. He knew he had to explore into the forensics behind all of this because interviews with the husband suicide of the suicide victim just led to a cold case. They knew that there was something up, but they had no evidence, of course. So the husband said all of this stuff about how she left right after dinner. There's nothing really notable. So Professor Alex Doxbury was asked into the case to help out. He was a current and tide specialist and was he was found by investigators. He had a complete working model of the exact Seattle estuary with all the currents and tides accurate in the past, present, and future. Now Duxbury needed to find out where the body had to have been dropped for it to wash up where it was found. Through this research, they were able to figure out that there was no way she had committed suicide after 12 like the husband had said. There is now scientific proof that the husband was lying. He never admitted it, but the jury were easily convinced by forensic evidence. That's the clip.
Ridley's fictional detective needed the help of an expert on tides and currents.
Hey.
So he tracked one down in real life.
So here we are.
Yep, there's the model.
It's enormous.
Professor Alan Duxbury's working model of the Seattle estuary could recreate the tides at any time in the past, present, or future.
Now, where's the Pacific Ocean?
The ocean is a saltwater tank. There is a tidal box in here that goes up and down, driven by a computer, and it produces the rise and fall of water in the model.
Ridley wanted to know where his fictional murderer could have dumped the body for it to wash up where it did.
My original plan was that perhaps the body had gone in north of the city of Seattle,
Up in here.
somewhere up in here, and then it ended up at Alki Point. And Dr. Duxbury said, no, it's just not the way it works.
Duxbury could not have known that his work on this detective story would one day help solve a real-life crime.
Look at that.
It's perfect.
Bullseye.
Don't you love?
So after showing you some extreme, crazy ways that cases have been solved, here are the more common ways to obtain evidence. So these are through things like blood splatter, DNA, entomology, dentistry, fingerprints, ballistic, and autopsies. And when none of these 7 forms of evidence are found at the scene, the chances of the case going cold skyrocket. And I'm going to go deeper into each of these small subjects and fields of forensic science. So blood splatter analysis originated in 1895 and focuses primarily on direction and velocity of the blood onto a surface. They can sometimes figure out what type of weapon was being used at the time too. DNA testing. So this was forensic science's biggest breakthrough in history. The accuracy of this test rendered your DNA and the slim chances it can be someone else, which is usually 1 to hundreds of millions, and it never really leaves any chance. So DNA can be obtained many different ways too. So entomology and dentistry. Entomology is a little grosser. Definitely wouldn't be wanting to do that, but it's really important actually, is what I've learned. So it's as gross as it sounds, law enforcement is often second place to the crime scene. Insects get there first, and their stages in their life cycle can give entomologists clues into the case, how old they've been there, stuff like that. So dentistry. The most common way that a dentist can help in a case is through old dental records. If there is an unidentified homicide victim, their identity can be found through their fillings, caps, and cavities. Victims can leave a bite mark, which can be traced back. Fingerprints, ballistics, and autopsies. So for fingerprints, these are seen as the most common form of forensic evidence. There's an entire computerized system of these. With ballistic, this really focuses on the grooves made on the bullet and any other way they can pinpoint the bullet to a specific weapon of use. And then in autopsies, although these can be rather grim, another thing I wouldn't really personally want to do, they're incredibly important in terms of finding the killer. Cause of death is almost found here too. So why I want to become a forensic scientist. In my opinion, forensic science's role in our justice system is incredibly important, and it's almost always relied upon in more serious cases. It is also the least biased part of the system, because forensic science is just looking for evidence and hard facts through honest work. They make the world a safer place with criminals knowing there will be repercussions to their actions. And I was still a bit confused about what it took to become a forensic scientist, even with all this motivation to become one. Thankfully, Jim Bomber's batch was quick to teach me the requirements and the timeline. So let's look at this.
compared to other.
Might be
and what
fine.
I look up to the early 20th century.
Let's see. Next question is, what is the best first step someone can make to become a forensic scientist?
That's a very good question. Is there an audience that you were thinking of? Because a first step, there's a lot of different first steps I found. So I know that I think your sister said you were in about your late teens. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm 18.
Okay, so I'm assuming you were thinking about sort of for this age range?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. So if you are interested in becoming a forensic psychologist, the first step that you should probably do is to start looking into the demands that is going to require of you over the next decade or so. When I was first getting interested in this, I had already known that I was going to be pursuing a PhD program in psychology, and that would take me, 5 or 6 years on top of my undergraduate training. So when I got out of high school, I was still looking at about, almost 10 years of additional academic work before I would have my official degree. And that might not be what everyone's looking for. That means that you're going to be close to 30 before you even are sort of like entering the.
Hey, so I just wanted to say thanks for listening. I had a lot of fun, learned a ton during this project. Yeah, feel free to ask me any questions through email.